I was driving home from a friend's place late at night. I can't remember the exact time, but it was probably around 2 or 3 in the morning. I live about 20 minutes away, which isn't too far since the houses in this area are spread out. The rain and lack of streetlights made visibility poor, so I was driving more slowly and cautiously. About 5 minutes down the road, I came to a traffic light. I had a red light, but there was a blue car on the other side, partially in the intersection, just sitting there at a green light. Its headlights were on, but it wasn't moving. I couldn't tell if there was something wrong or if the driver was asleep. When the lights changed, I drove forward, slowly maneuvering around the blue car. I tried to discreetly look inside as I passed, but the rain on my window obstructed my view. After passing the blue car and continuing down the road, it turned and started following me, so it clearly wasn't broken down. I kept an eye on my mirrors. While I'm not usually paranoid, the situation felt staged. A minute later, the car's headlights grew brighter in my mirrors as it pulled closer, almost right up to my back bumper. Given the weather, this made me very uncomfortable. I glanced back at the road and noticed a small light on my dashboard indicating one of my tires was low on air. This is a common signal, but it felt odd given the situation. I looked back in my mirrors and saw the car still tailing me. Its headlights so close they made it hard to see the car itself. I was just 4 or 5 minutes from home, nearing the entrance to my neighborhood, when another signal on my dashboard started flickering. Flat tire. My stomach dropped. I was almost certain the car behind me had done something. I drove another minute, hoping to get closer to home, but I could feel my car sinking to the left. I was practically driving on the rims. I had to pull over, and the car behind me did the same. I should have called someone as soon as I parked, but I was so focused on what the person behind me was doing that it didn't cross my mind. Even if I had called someone, it probably wouldn't have prevented what happened next. Once parked, 3 doors opened from the car, and 3 men got out. I had only a few seconds to prepare and react, but I was helpless and defenseless. They ran up to my car, 2 on my side and 1 on the other. One man came right up to my window, yelling at me to open the door and pointing a gun at me. It all happened so fast. I was in a daze. I started to reach for the door, but the man by the back door smashed something against the window, shattering it, then reached in and opened the back door. They were all still yelling, both at me and at each other. The man in the back reached across, opening the other back door, then reached in front of me to open my door. I sat there, holding my hands up to show I wasn't a threat. I knew there was no way out of this, even if I had a weapon. Once my door was open, the man with the gun pulled me out of the car and slammed me to the ground. Oddly, while I was on the ground, looking at the rainy pavement, all I could think about was how cold and wet it was. Not about the gun being pressed to the back of my head or that I was being robbed and beaten. I think my mind was trying to distance itself from the traumatic situation. I wasn't on the ground long before the men by the car called out, and the guy holding me down hit me in the back of the head, causing me to hit the pavement again. I wasn't sure if he hit me with the gun or just his fist because I was already numb. I'm surprised it didn't knock me out. I heard their car doors close and then the sound of them driving away. I rolled over, still dazed, and tried to pick myself up. They had taken my phone, so I had to drive my car home and call the police once I got there, which ended up damaging my rims further. The investigation went nowhere, only determining that the suspects had placed small tire spikes in the road at the intersection I crossed. I was lucky to have only hit one spike, which caused less damage than usual. They likely planned to ambush me as soon as I hit the track, but in the end, it didn't make a difference. I'm 24 and lived alone with my dog, Bear, in a cozy townhome until 3 months ago. I moved in at 22 when I got a decent job. I loved the home since it was the first place I ever rented for myself. But 2 years of happy living were ruined by one night. It was gloomy and raining a lot outside. It was my day off, so I was sitting on a chair in my living room, scrolling through my phone. It was 8 p.m., an hour before my usual bedtime. Bear had been sitting by the back door, looking outside. He started whining and ran up to me, signaling that he needed to go out. I got up, let him out, then closed the door and stood in the kitchen. While it was just a townhome, there was a small fence separating the backyards, so I didn't worry about Bear running away. Also, Bear isn't a large dog. He's fluffy and small, like a teddy bear. Not long, maybe 15 or 20 seconds after I let him out, I heard him whimper and bark. It was a cowering bark, like he was running away from something. I was scared and rushed to the door, seeing Bear running back towards me with his tail between his legs. Once he was inside, I leaned my head out and scanned the backyard, expecting a coyote or something by the fence, but nothing was there. I made sure Bear was okay and locked the door. He never does anything like that, which worried me for him. I let him sit on my lap for the rest of the night. Over the next 30 minutes, he kept perking his head up and staring at the windows and doors, each time a different one. Then, after 45 minutes of sitting there, Bear turned his head and stared at the window behind me, lowering his ears and growling. I turned to look where he was looking, and right in the window, just a couple of feet from us, was a man staring back at me. He was almost right up against the glass. I jumped up and screamed, stepping backward. The man sprinted away down the side of the house. Bear started barking again from the sudden chaos. I closed the blinds and checked all the others, making sure they were closed as well. From the quick glimpse I got, I didn't recognize the man. I didn't know who he was, what he was doing here, or why he was staring at me. I tried to listen for any more indications that he was still around, but the rain outside was too loud, covering up any possible sounds. Bear seemed calmer, so I stayed up a while longer just to be safe, then went upstairs and had Bear sleep in my room with me. It took a long time to fall asleep with a lot on my mind, but after an hour or so, I slowly dozed off. When I woke up, Bear was standing by the bedroom door, staring at it. This was freaky to see waking up in the middle of the night, but seconds later, I heard something below me. A man talked. Not long after, a man on the other side of the house talked back. Their footsteps were loud, and they didn't seem to whisper. It was like they didn't care if I knew they were inside my home. My bedroom door was locked, but I had nowhere else to go. I went over to Bear, quietly trying to keep him calm, then picked him up and went to the corner of my room behind the bed. It took me a while to realize, but then it struck me that I hadn't heard any noises at all in the past minute. No steps or voices. This was when I took my phone out and called the police, whispering as softly as I could. As I told them my address, Bear started a low growl, then began barking and whining as two sets of footsteps started making their way up the stairs. I begged the operator to send someone immediately. The two men started talking to each other again, but it was hard to make out their words. "Hey, we just want to talk. We're not here to hurt you," I screamed, saying I called the cops and for them to leave. I was panicking, not knowing what else to do. There was a pause afterward. "We're here to help you," one of the men said. I didn't respond as I was busy trying to muffle my crying. "Open the door." It got quiet again. I could only hear them breathing behind the door for what felt like a whole minute before one of them walked back down the stairs. I couldn't tell if they went downstairs or if they'd left, but I was sure that only one set of footsteps left the bedroom door. It was so quiet, though, and I couldn't hear any breathing. In the far distance, the soft sound of sirens started to get louder. A sense of safety was finally coming back. Once the sirens got closer, I heard footsteps running out of the house downstairs. But now, I was unsure of where the other man was. It seemed unlikely for him to still be by my door, but I could swear I never heard him leave. I waited for the police to pull up and make their way inside. I heard them searching downstairs, then slowly making their way upstairs and knocking on my door. I almost didn't want to answer, still thinking that other man had to be somewhere nearby. When I opened the door, though, it was just an officer. I immediately told him about my concerns. He directed me out of the house as one of his partners continued searching, but nobody was found. The only thing they found was watery footprints all around the house and an unlocked window, which, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I kept locked or not. It terrified me, feeling so confident that the other man was still there, never hearing him leave, but then there being no trace of him. It made it impossible to sleep at night, having this feeling of someone still in the house, watching me. I moved out 3 months ago. It was too much stress on my mind, having a loose end like that, especially since neither of them was ever identified or arrested. There was no clear intention the men had either, which is just another question added to the list of uncertainties. Even now, living miles away in a new apartment, I still sometimes feel like I'm not alone. I work at a convenience store located at the corner of a small shopping strip. It's essentially a smaller, local version of a 7-Eleven. For a while, I worked morning shifts starting at 3 a.m. and ending at 1 p.m. I took these shifts because they were usually the slowest and required the least amount of work. My job involved tending to customers, stocking shelves, and taking out the trash, which meant I had very little to do. It was the middle of winter when this happened, but living in a warmer state, it usually rains instead of snowing. There was a light pour outside, just enough to keep most people away. On early mornings like these, I like to lean against the front of the building and smoke to pass the time. I wasn't supposed to, but there was no one to stop me. There are about 8 or 9 other stores connected to ours along the shopping strip. All of them had normal hours, so none opened until around 6 or 7 in the morning. So, when I saw a car pull into the parking lot while I was smoking outside, I naturally assumed they were coming to the convenience store. I put out my cigarette and tossed it in the trash before heading back inside and around the corner. With nothing much to do, I was just waiting for the customer to come in and leave so I could get back to being bored alone. However, after a few minutes of no one coming in, I walked back around the corner and checked outside the door. The car was still there, parked in a nearby space, but the headlights were off, and it seemed empty, given the light rain and the other stores being closed. I was puzzled about where the driver went. I took another look around, seeing nobody, then closed the door and went back inside. Another 30 minutes of nothing passed, and I stood behind the counter, spacing out. I checked the time, noting I had only been at work for a little over an hour, deciding I should check the trash cans around the store and toss them in the dumpster out back. I began my rounds. As I was collecting the trash, I heard a faint click sound from outside. It sounded like something snapping or breaking, but between the rain hitting the roof and the sound being somewhat distant, it was hard to pinpoint. At the time, I barely thought about it, dismissing it as just another random sound these old buildings made. Once I filled the cart with trash bags, I rolled it into the back room and unlocked the door leading to the dumpster. I sighed, seeing that the rain was now pouring harder. Of course, just as I needed to go outside. Nonetheless, I pushed the cart through the rain to the dumpster, directly across from the door. After tossing in all the trash, I turned back and noticed something out of place. The store directly connected to mine had its door wedged open. I'd never seen anyone there earlier than 6, so it made me curious. I went back inside to get out of the rain and then out to the front door to check the other store's door. All the lights were off, and it looked locked up and empty as usual at this time. After thinking for a few minutes and figuring I had nothing better to do, I went back outside by the dumpster and walked up to the open door. The lights were off, but it seemed to lead into a small closet-like room with another door, probably leading to the main storeroom. I stepped inside, standing in the doorway to avoid looking like I was sneaking in. Inside, I could hear someone moving around in the other room, walking and opening drawers. It sounded like they were making a mess, which made me even more suspicious. "Hey, is everything okay in there?" I called out, hoping for a reassuring response from a neighboring store worker. The noises stopped. I waited a few seconds, realizing this wasn't normal and something was definitely wrong. I stepped back outside and into the rain, quickly making my way back to my store. As I did, I noticed something was missing from the door I had just left. It took a second to figure out, but I saw that the handle was gone, leaving just an empty hole where the handle and lock usually were. The wedge holding the door open was actually the broken door handle. I ran back into my store, locked all the doors, and called 911 as well as my store manager. Once I knew help was on the way, I put my ear against the wall connecting our stores, listening to the suspected robbery. Whoever it was must have known I called the police because they started moving quickly, running around and making a lot of noise. After 30 seconds to a minute of this, I saw lights flashing outside and heard sirens approaching the back of the building. The footsteps moved quickly to the back of the store, followed by loud yelling, presumably from the officers. After a minute, I checked the back door, seeing a less chaotic scene, and went out to talk to the officers. I thanked them for coming so quickly and gave them a statement. The man who was arrested had a pillowcase filled with nearly $6,000 worth of stolen items. He also had an empty firearm and various tools used to break down doors and locks. Unbeknownst to me, he had also broken into the store 2 spots down. It's unclear whether he knew I was working, but my store lights were on, so it's unlikely he would have broken into my store. However, several large scratches were found on the back of our door handle, possibly from a previous attempt.